Well, he's the forgotten character of Christmas. This man, Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, is the forgotten character of Christmas. You realize there are only 15 verses in all of the four Gospels that make mention of Joseph? You know that his name is only mentioned 8 times in those Gospels, while Mary's name is mentioned 24 times? Do you know that we know nothing about him from the time Jesus is 12 years of age and up? Do you know that he doesn't speak one single word? He doesn't have one single line in the Gospels? And when it comes to our Christmas carols and our hymns that are found in our hymnal, his name only appears 3 times in all of those hymns and all of those carols, while Mary's name appears 15 times. Joseph really is the forgotten character of Christmas. I love the story told by a mother about the picture her daughter was drawing of the nativity scene. Her daughter wanted to dutifully draw the characters and the animals in the nativity scene, so she went about making that drawing, and when she was done with it, she proudly brought it to her mom, and she showed her the picture, and she said, "Look, Mom, here are the wise men, and here are the shepherds, and here's Mary, and there's baby Jesus, and there are the camels, and see the cows, and see the sheep," and Mom noticed there was even a cat and dog in the nativity scene, but no Joseph. And Mom said, "Honey, didn't you leave somebody out?" She said, "Who?" She said, "Well, where's Joseph?" The little girl looked at the picture and said, "Oh, who needs Joseph anyway?" Well, you need Joseph. And I need Joseph. And the Christmas story needs Joseph. And so this morning, I want us to learn about and learn from Joseph. Learn about Joseph and learn from Joseph. First of all, Joseph was an exceptionally compassionate man. I don't know if you know how engagements went in that Hebrew culture or not, but typically the marriages were arranged. The family on the male side would decide their son could be married to this woman, and the family on the woman's side would decide that this man could be married to their daughter, and so the marriage typically was arranged. Now, we don't know factually that Mary and Joseph's marriage was arranged, but it would have been common in that day and time for that to be the case. Once they were committed to one another, once this family had said, "Yes, our son can be with your daughter," and her family said, "Yes, our daughter can be with your son," then they would go to the priest, and the priest would solidify their relationship, consecrate their relationship. And in effect, standing before the priest, that couple in Hebrew society became engaged, became betrothed. Typically, they would not marry for a year. The man would live with his family, the female would live with her family. They would sort of date along the way, and they would consummate the marriage at the end of a year. So keep in mind, the marriages are typically arranged. They go before the priest. They are betrothed officially. They are engaged officially. That engagement lasts a year before the marriage is consummated. It's in that year period. It's in the time from when they stood before the priest and gave themselves to each other before the marriage is consummated that Joseph learns that Mary is pregnant. Now, this woman committed herself to him, and he committed himself to that woman. And he discovers, and then we don't know how he learned it. We don't know if Mary told him or he learned some other way, but Joseph learned that Mary was pregnant, and there's only one conclusion here. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out. There's only one conclusion. Mary has been with another man. This woman who had given herself to him in official consecration before a priest, as this man had given himself to her, is now pregnant with child, and there's no other explanation but that Mary has been unfaithful. Matthew tells us that then Joseph decided to divorce her quietly. Now, I don't think the average person understands the power of those words. Joseph chose to divorce her, quote, divorce her quietly, because I want to tell you this morning that's a very compassionate thing to do. You're saying, "You got to be kidding, preacher." What's so compassionate about deciding to divorce this pregnant woman? But once again, you have to understand something about Hebrew society. In Joseph's day and time, it was the expectation. Let that sink in. It was the expectation that Joseph, upon learning that his betrothed was pregnant outside of their relationship, would bring her into the public square, publicly humiliate her, publicly castigate her, publicly condemn her, and then ask her to be stoned to death. Every Hebrew male knew that there was only one thing you would do if you found that your betrothed were with child. You would bring her into the public square. You would put that big S on her forehead, metaphorically speaking, that horrible sinner. You would castigate her, condemn her, do it before everybody, before the whole town, and then you would stone her to death. But Joseph chose to divorce her quietly. And I cannot tell you the embarrassment that brought Joseph. I cannot tell you the castigation that brought Joseph from his peers. How dare a male Hebrew not have that woman stoned? But Joseph was compassionate for Mary. We need more Josephs. I don't know if you have read some of the stories that are out in the newspaper now about what Santa is hearing when children sit on his lap. It's a little disconcerting to hear what Santa is hearing from children nowadays. Typically, they ask for iPods and games and clothes and all sorts of things. That's not what Santa's hearing nowadays from a lot of children. Like a little 5-year-old girl that sat on Santa's lap in a city, at a mall in Illinois, sat on Santa's lap, and Santa said, "What do you want, honey?" And she said, "Will you turn my daddy into an elf?" He said, Why would you want to turn your daddy into an elf? And she said, "Well, he lost his job. Maybe you could make him an elf." And the mother, who was with the little brother in a stroller to the side of the Santa scene, broke down in tears. Or the little boy who sat on Santa's lap in another city and he said, "What do you want, son?" And he said, "I want shoes." He said, "I bet you want Air Jordans." "No, Santa, I just want school shoes because mine have holes in them." Now, if that doesn't break your heart, I don't know what does. But it's not seasonal compassion that we need, it's lifestyle compassion that we need. Somebody has said there are 3 types of compassion. There's emotional compassion, there's seasonal compassion, and there's lifestyle compassion. Emotional compassion is the response to Sudan. You get emotional about it. You hear about hunger in this world, and you see something on television, you read about it, and you respond emotionally. Seasonal compassion is what we do at Christmas. We want to sponsor a child. That's wonderful. I'm thankful this church does so much of that. Lifestyle compassion, however, doesn't start and end at Christmas. It's the way we live. It's like Joseph. It's being tuned in to the hurts of others readily. Secondly, Joseph was open to miracle and to mystery and to wonder. You realize he dreamed? And he heard an angel in a dream? Many psychiatrists would write him off. He had a dream, and the angel came to him and he said, "Yes, take Mary as your wife and take that child and name him Jesus and raise him." Then after the wise men come and go, Herod's going to kill all children 2 years of age and under. The angel he has a dream. The angel comes again and tells him to flee and go to Egypt. And then after Herod dies, has another dream. The angel comes and tells him to leave Egypt and go to Galilee and settle in Nazareth. 3 times he has a dream. 3 times an angel comes and talks to him. And not once does Joseph doubt that God is present in that dream and in that angel. Because for Joseph, everything doesn't have to be explicable. It doesn't have to be rational. It doesn't have to make scientific sense. I don't know if you know the name Frederick Buechner or not. Frederick Buechner is a highly noted theologian of the Presbyterian faith. He's a preacher, a theologian. He's prolific. He's written several books. In one of those books, Secret in the Dark, he tells a remarkable story, and I want you to hear this story carefully. Frederick Buechner. He tells a story about when his friend Dudley died. Dudley was 68 years of age, and he died suddenly. Best friend. He died suddenly. It was a great loss for Frederick and his family. He said, and that was in March of that year, and in May of that year, he and his wife were visiting the wife of Dudley and staying in Dudley's house. And in fact, Frederick and his wife slept in Dudley's room. And during the night, Frederick, as he writes in that, has a dream. Now let me read to you the words of Frederick Buechner as he talks about that dream. Dudley came to me in my dream. I dreamed he was standing there in the dark guest room where we were sleeping, looking very much like himself in the navy blue jersey and white socks he often wore. I told him how much I missed him and how glad I was to see him again. He said, "Same to you, Frederick." And then I said, "Are you really there, Dudley? I mean, is this really you, or am I just dreaming?" And he said, "No, it's me, Frederick." Then he plucked a strand of wool out of his jersey and he tossed it to me. And I caught that strand between my thumb and my forefinger. And it was so unbelievably real that it woke me up. And that's all there was to the dream. Dudley came into my dream. We talked to one another, and then he took a strand of wool off his sweater and tossed it to me, and I caught it between my thumb and my forefinger. Got up and went down to breakfast the next morning, and I told my wife about the dream, and she said, "Honey, I saw that strand on the carpet as we were getting dressed." "You saw that strand of blue wool on the carpet in the room where we were?" "Yes, I did, honey." She was sure it hadn't been there the night before. I rushed upstairs to see for myself, and there it was, a little tangle of navy blue wool on the carpet. Now, you can do with that story what you want. You can debunk it. You can disbelieve it. You can call it spiritually hokey. Or you can listen to Frederick Buechner, who is no spiritual lightweight, who is not one who takes lightly the fluff of things, but who writes, "Even though I had the thing right there in my hand, that strand of blue wool, my first inclination was to deny it for the simple reason I suspect that it was too unsettling to my common sense way of looking at the world. I wanted to shrug it off as a crazy fluke. But maybe it was a crazy little peek behind the curtain, a dim little whisper of God's providence from the wings. You're not alone." Now again, you can do what you want with those mind-boggling experiences of life. You can rebuke them, debunk them, disbelieve them, call them spiritually hokey, or you can come to understand our lives are full of the inexplicable, the seemingly irrational, the miraculous. Just as Joseph had a dream and an angel came, so we have our experiences too. The world is full of that which cannot be explained, as is your life. Thirdly, I would tell you that Joseph was a good father. I came across a little song about Joseph that I had not heard before in my preparing for this sermon. I want to share it with you. It's called "When Joseph Went to Bethlehem." It was written in 1960. Listen to this about Joseph as a father. It's really neat. "I think he took great care to place his tools and close his shop and leave no shavings there. He urged the donkey forward, then with Mary on its back, and carried bread and goat cheese in a little linen sack. I think they're at the busy end that he was meek and mild, and awed to be the guardian of Mary's sacred child. Perhaps all through the chilly hours he smoothed the swaddling bands, and Jesus felt the quiet strength of Joseph's gentle hands. And close beside the manger bed, he dimmed the lantern's light and held the little Jesus close upon that holy night." Let me tell you 3 reasons that I believe Joseph was a good father. First of all, he was a loving, self-giving father. Did you ever think about the fact that Jesus called God Abba, Papa? That the Aramaic word that Jesus used for God was Abba, which literally means Papa? And where do you think that Jesus learned that fathers are loving? Where do you think Jesus learned that Abba was the appropriate word for God? That it was okay to call God in His language Papa? Because He had a loving Father. named Joseph. I think, secondly, that Joseph was a spiritual guide for Jesus. You do understand, don't you, that as a Jewish child, somebody would take Jesus at 6 years of age to the synagogue. That would have been Joseph. Walked him every day to the synagogue school. You do know that he had to learn 613 commandments, memorize 613 commandments to prepare for his bar mitzvah at age 13. Somebody had to teach him those 613 commandments. Who do you think did that? Joseph. Who do you think sat with him in the synagogue worship service and explained to him the rituals? And as the Torah was read, what it all means? That was his father, Joseph. I think thirdly, Joseph spent time with Jesus. We know he taught him the carpenter trade. Every male Jew taught every male son a trade. And we know Jesus became a carpenter because Joseph was a carpenter. You ever thought about the fact how they spent time together in that shop? And then when Jesus happened to cut that board a little too short, Joseph just put his arm around him and said, "Son, I sure love our time together." One scholar says that they would have walked 4 miles together almost every day working in Sephora's, where probably Joseph worked as a carpenter, and every day they would have talked along the way. That father, that son. Let me tell you something, fathers, I want you to pay attention. There's something about fatherhood here. It's how to be a father. Joseph tells us how to be a father. You first of all are loving and self-giving. You secondly are a spiritual leader to your children. And you thirdly spend time with your children. You want to be a good dad? Then be loving and self-giving. Be a spiritual rock in the home to your children. And spend time with your children. Finally, I would say to you this morning that Joseph listened and was obedient. You realize again the angel came to him 3 times. Take the woman, name the child, raise the child, flee to Egypt, go to Galilee, and every single time Joseph obeyed. The angel spoke and Joseph obeyed. If you were to ask me this morning, what is the one word that defines a right relationship with God? What is the one word that defines a right relationship with God? Would it be faith? No. Would it be worship? No. Would it be love? Surely that defines a right relationship with God. No. Obedience. Listen to me carefully. You can have all the faith in God in the world and not be obedient. You can gather in this wonderful sanctuary, some other place for worship. You can worship God and not be obedient. You can even love God and not be obedient. What Joseph reminds us is that obedience is the way we show God He matters to us. So this morning I give you Joseph. I give you a man who teaches us much. I give you a man who teaches us lifestyle compassion, and not seasonal compassion, but lifestyle compassion. I give you a man who is not hung up on whether something's explicable, scientifically understandable, rationally explainable. A man who believes in miracles. I give to you a good father. And I give to you an obedient man. Thanks be to God that we have Joseph in the Christmas story.